So this morning we're talking about this passage in Acts, but also we're starting the book study on We Should Get Together. And so that title of the book, We Should Get Together, here made me think about something that happens to me often that probably happens to you, and it's goes like this. You see someone that you haven't seen in a while at a grocery store or at an event or a coffee shop, and you say, hey, it's been a while since I've seen you. And they say, yeah, it has been. And you kind of go through how's it going? How are your kids, your partner, your job? And say, oh, I'm so busy. Yeah, me too, just so busy. And then it kind of goes to this point where hey, you know what? We should hang out. It would be good for us to hang out, right? And yeah, let's hang out. And yeah, we can get the kids together and have a backyard barbecue. Yeah, it'd be so fun. And then yeah, I'll shoot you a text or something. Let's say that, or we'll send you an email. We'll do something, but we kind of both know that I'm not going to do it when we leave this. And then you both leave, and you're like, yeah, I probably am not going to hang out with that person again until you see them 6 months later and at the same grocery store, and hey, we should get together, and just this cycle that we go through. But we don't follow up with that, but we know that community and connection is good for us. It's as important to us as to our health and well-being as a safe place to live, or access to clean air and food and water. But yeah, we kind of keep it at that surface level. But when we're here at the Abbey each week, we've seen witness and been able to bear witness to transformation that happens when we can show up and be our full selves. We can create this safe environment here where, just like we say at the end in the prayer by Ganella Norris, that you see me for myself and I see you for yourself, and that we are bread for one another. So we want to be a community that is here, that stands for something different, and doing that is risky. It means we're vulnerable. It's also a statement against traditional type of community that usually seeks power for itself. And so kind of go through this passage one more time. I just want to, as the third reading in our Lectio Divina, as Deborah says, we have to have three, so here it goes. Acts 2:42, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Awe came upon everyone, because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all, as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. So earlier in this chapter, Acts 2, it describes this time of Pentecost where all these people were together, and they spoke of different languages, but yet everybody understood one another. And so Peter says, but don't worry, these people are not drunk. They are filled by the Spirit. They're filled by some kind of spirit, either way. But everybody came together and understood what each other needed. And this passage, Acts 2:42-47, is one that's been held up as a pinnacle in the Christian church. Some churches today are named the Acts 2 church. I just kind of Googled Acts 2 church, and one church said that they were casual, family-friendly, contemporary, and spirit-filled. And they talk about the relationships that are so special in the church. I think this church was in Oklahoma. Facebook is fun, they say. Twitter connects. However, we see no replacement for old-school face-to-face relationship. Our life groups, also known as small groups, provide a framework for everything that we do that provides an in-depth way for us to get to know each other. When I kind of looked into that church a little more, I didn't get the sense that you could actually be your full self at that church. And I might be wrong, but it just enough. There's some words on the site that's it's probably not a place you can be your full self, I think. Another church actually more specifically called itself the Acts 2:42 church. Like people are really into this passage. They name whole churches on it. And as you continue on your Google search of Acts 2 church, there's questions that you are prompted to consider. Do you go to an Acts 2 church? Is your church an Acts 2 church, and should it be? And that website I actually clicked in, and the answer is no, you should not be at an Acts 2 church. Because if you are, you're not at a real biblical church, because there's no such thing as Acts 2. That was a one-time event. Other links will tell you that an Acts 2 church is that was just part of a hippie movement, and that real churches should be more about serious things like budgets. So, you kind of get the point. There's a lot of thoughts about this passage, but I want us to think about it in light of community, as people together, as connected people, as we as an Abbey community, and we try to be a part of connecting communities in an inclusive way, thinking about our city, and our city is connected, that we have welcome and inclusive public spaces. That's what I think about when I read this passage, that everyone shared what they had, and there was no one in need, and we were able to distribute our gifts and skills throughout the community. So when Deborah first asked about this passage and this book, about speaking on it, I thought about a book that I read in the early 2000s called Bowling Alone by Dr. Robert Putnam. And Robert Putnam was an academic at Harvard, did a lot of research and writing, and a lot of it went unnoticed, I think, but until this book, Bowling Alone, came out. And talks about this idea of bowling alone comes from, his research showed that since the 70s and 80s, there are a lot of bowling leagues, and yet in his research in the late 90s, there were more people that were bowling kind of week by week, but less people in bowling leagues. So more people just going out for fun, and not in that consistent kind of routine meeting with people that you might work with or have other things in common, and bowling. And he actually talks about a story of two individuals that worked together, didn't know each other very well, but through the bowling league, one was 63 years old and the other was 30 years old, and the 63-year-old needed a kidney transplant, and the 30-year-old said, I'll donate my kidney to you. And had not been for that consistency of the relationship, perhaps that wouldn't have happened, and he wouldn't have got that kidney. And he said he cared for the other person. He rooted for him. And those stories, that break barriers of race and generation, those stories are less typical today. And we've been kind of pulled apart. And even up to today, it's not just an issue of the last part of the 20th century, like Dr. Robert Putnam says. So more and more people are bowling alone. But we get to be a part of building community, and we're going against that trend of being individualistic. And Dr. Putnam talks about in this book this idea of reciprocity, that that occurs when community ties are strong, and when there's strong social capital in a community. That you are there for each other. You don't know when you're going to need that reciprocity, but you are giving it to others. And you don't know exactly how it's going to come to you in return, but you believe that it will. And Yogi Berra said, if you don't go to someone's funeral, they won't come to yours. So this idea of generalized reciprocity is very compelling, and we need more of it today. It's very good for us. And in fact, Dr. Putnam talks about that he saw a correlation between people that were a part of some type of a religious community and their engagement in the civic life of their place. And they tended to volunteer more and donate more to organizations. I don't know if that holds true today, 20 years later, but at the time it was the case. So think about, how do we create community? And community is created, one conversation at a time, in one room at a time. It's just the social fabric of where we're at. And we can be a part of communities that we focus on our gifts and what we can contribute to a community, as opposed to a lot of communities today that really market fear and work out of self-interest and assigns fault and tends to try to accumulate power for itself instead of distributing power and gifts. And we become powerful when we shift the context of how we act in the world to one of being of benefit to others here in the room and outside. We can show up by choice here. That's key, right? We associate together because we want to be here. We can, by convening together, we listen and learn, ask good questions, we're curious. We don't have answers and don't just start with our own assumption, but we're ready to listen and change our perspective. Just like Deborah says at the end of every week when she offers someone here on the pastoral care team that they are here to listen and not offer a single cliche. That's powerful. And this small group here at the Abbey, we are powerful when we open opportunities for diversity and dissent and different ideas, but we all bring our gifts together and we're valued together. The skill is, I think, getting the questions right of what we ask. Questions that seek to understand and listen and create engagement and dialogue back and forth, because engagement leads to more accountability together and commitment to a better future. So I've been thinking about engagement and community for a long time, like community development, community design, listening, intentional community, communal living, and thought about what does it actually mean? What does friendship and community mean? And in this book, Kat Vellos talks about compatibility in a way, knowing that we don't have to have everything in common, but that we can take turns. Just like Joel Walker wants to lead a hike, and some people want to go on that with him, and Deborah doesn't want to go. She's into other things, right? And we can trade that. But Deborah talks about our friends and our family, and then those friends that turn into family. And unfortunately, in the research in this book, We Should Get Together, talks about 1 in 4 Americans. Research says that they feel like there's no one that they can talk to, and they feel alone. No one's there for them. And it's not just the rise of the iPhone and social media that's led to that. It's been an epidemic that's been going on since the 70s. But there are signs of that changing. Places like Spielbound and maker spaces and showing up in the rooms like this today, we all still very care about face-to-face and human connection. But even when we want that connection, there's still barriers like class. We tend to, we know that our social media feeds and algorithms sort of reinforce an echo chamber, and we want to break away from that. Unfortunately, we tend to spend time with people that are in the same class as us. And we need to break down those socioeconomic backgrounds or barriers. And Dr. Ruby Payne and her work in the Bridges Out of Poverty, she talks about the hidden rules of class, that the ways that we think about time and possessions and money and relationships, that tends to be divided by class, and we are aware of that. We need to do better and bring people in with us that are different than us. These are unspoken habits or cues that we have that keep us divided. And it's not just in our individual, how we think about time and money and possessions. Our entire communities have been designed for exclusion. If you think about the way our cities are developed, they started out in Omaha. You can be in neighborhoods like this where we have homes that are closer to the street, that have front porches and sidewalks that facilitate connection. A lot of life happens out in the community. And as you move west, you see homes getting larger, spread further apart. You're introduced first not by a porch and a yard, but by a giant driveway and a garage, maybe 4 garages, and a very small front door that's hard to see. And most of life happens in the backyard in a private space where you only are bringing in people typically that are invited. And those are people that are probably like you. And in addition to that, we have entire laws and regulation that keep people out from single-family zoning, that you can only own a single-family house, and that tends to That is a very like a coded like racist law that divides us again. So you can be people that says, yes, I want people in my back. I want a diversity of housing type and income levels in my community, because that's actually makes us more resilient and sustainable. And it's better for us too. And like Jane Jacobs in her book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, talks about this idea of eyes on the street. That's just by being around other people, you feel that connection to them. You feel safe. You know that if something happens to you, someone will probably notice and be out there. So we can design our spaces for connection and learning and spaces of rest and reflection as well. So friendship is complicated. When you're younger, you just kind of go next door and knock on the door and ask, can your friend come out and play? And as you get older, that's a little strange. You probably don't want to do that. But Kat Vellos talks about there are actually ways you can do it. You can invite people to, in your neighborhood, an awesome people party, she says. Like, just host it at a coffee shop, and you'll find out that your neighbors probably have a lot more in common as you and people in your community. And if you just ask good questions, like, do you like pie or cake? That tends to evoke a lot of responses, and you get deep pretty quickly. That we might be in this room together. We might have a lot of things in common. We just don't know it because we only spend this 1 hour together, but we need to facilitate and make space and time for each other outside of this. Places like small groups is a good way to do that. A couple of other points here that she talks about, these components of connection, that we need to have compatibility, that some alignment of values and interests, but willingness to trade and take time learning the other person's interest. Proximity, we kind of need to be around people. And frequency, some consistency to it, which we practice here at the Abbey. And then commitment, that idea that we're here together, we have each other's back. And in my life in Omaha, Omaha's a big, small town. We kind of all know each other. And when you go to the store and such, I just plan on seeing somebody that I know. And that's beneficial. It's healthy for us. And that idea of reciprocity is so true in those. And this year, like 2023, has been difficult personally and in our family, in our close friends, in the Abbey community. Things that are happening at the state, the unicameral, like there are hard things that have been going on. And you realize that people show up for you, that they nourish you in ways that you didn't know you needed, but they're present in ways that are so valuable to us, to our betterment. It's like when we recite those words from, Ganella Norris, that to be bread for each other, like that's what it means to show up for each other. It deepens our commitment to one another. The part of this book that kind of want to end on is commitment, that it's only a quarter of the way through the book, so I'm sure we'll learn more about the book as the sermon series goes on. But this part where I ended is around commitment. And she says, ultimately, friendship in community is about commitment for each other, how we show up for one another. A strong commitment consists of tangible and intangible ways that we say, I'll be there for you. I've got your back. How we show up for each other determines whether the friendship feels balanced, supportive, trustworthy, and grounded. We show our commitment through core behaviors like openness and caring, trust, dedication, and reciprocity. So when we belong to a community like a place like the Abbey, we are rooted in a group that believes in the goodness of each other and our community, and we seek to draw that out against the things that fracture us, and we look for restoration in our communities and healing in ourselves. We know that words like healing and wholeness and holy all come from the same root word. We become more generous and open and accepting of others. It demands our presence and time, and the bonds of community hold us stronger and pull us towards our best selves. And it's in this community, in this place, where we can choose to extend ourselves in generosity and affection for one another, that we might continue to create that persistent idea of generalized reciprocity of healing for each other, for ourselves, and the world. May it be so.